You've been using the wrong enchant for PvE. You should not be using Astral, Detonation, Curse of Bloodthirsty, or anything else. And that's because Grim is undeniably the best enchant in the game. If you don't know what Grim does, it applies a 20% debuff to the target on your 4th M1. And unlike Heroism, which has its 20% damage reduced to 5% in PvE, Grim is not affected by this same system, since it's a debuff to enemies and not a buff to your own damage. But it being a debuff has one more absolutely insane use. It can bypass the damage cap. If you also don't know, there is a hard damage cap of 175% to your multipliers, but things like Auto Scream and Taunt, as well as Grim, can bypass this. So if you manage to get all three up on one enemy, you'd be dealing 230% damage. And that's insane considering Grim doesn't have any requirements and you can just put it on your weapon for free. The one singular downside to Grim is it's bad if you're fighting multiple enemies or weaker targets, but these two downsides are pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, since the time where your damage matters most is bosses. And well, Grim is better the more HP the target has. For example, with the worst possible timing with Grim on Chaser, it would proc on the 4th hit, and if you land the other 3 hits, you'd get 3 hits with Grim and 4 hits without. But even in this worst possible scenario, Grim has a 9% effective extra damage. You may think that Astral and Bloodthirsty are better, since Astral applies 15% damage on every hit, and Bloodthirsty applies 10%. I'll tell you why Grim is just so much better, even in the worst possible scenario, after I remind you to like and subscribe. We're so close to 5k, and of course, if you want to get any of my record-breaking PvE builds, make sure you join my Discord. Anyways, with the worst possible effective damage buff of 9% and the best of 20% extra damage, what you may have not noticed is this percentage can apply to mantra damage as well, not just your M1 damage. So on the Godslayer PvE version 3, I'm dealing absolutely insane mantra damage, and this damage is buffed by Grim, so that means I can get up to an effective 40% extra damage buff with Grim alone, simply because it buffs mantra damage and M1 damage equally. This aspect of Grim makes it so much better than any other enchant in the game, because other enchants like Bloodthirsty and Astral only buff your raw M1 damage, while Grim is also buffing your mantra damage. It's easily twice as good as these other enchants. Plus, Grim is a whole lot easier to get than farming 8 hours for Astral. Here's a quick few fun facts and reasons why other enchants probably don't work as well as you don't think. Detonation's Explosion can do up to 200 damage, so this would average out to an extra 60 damage per M1 in a Chaser run. Bloodthirsty has a guaranteed 10% damage buff to your M1s. This is only 1% better than Grim's worst scenario, but it's a whole lot worse if you include mantra damage. And Astral gives a 15% damage to your M1s. You might think that this is worth it on an M1 focused build, however the Astral buff applies as a damage multiplier, so that means Astral's damage multiplier is capped at the standard 175%. This means it's acting as a talent and not as a DVM bonus, meaning that Astral is actually useless on most builds. Another PvE channel, Danny Kress, is covering a bunch of enchants and how they actually work. His videos should be up within a few days, so I would highly recommend going and checking his channel out because he covers a lot of very interesting PvE topics in a lot of depth. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe and check out some other PvE content, and I'll see you next time.